The emergency room was chaos. Blood pooled on the white tiles, machines beeped frantically, and somewhere in the distance, a woman's voice cut through it all with surgical precision. But this wasn't the voice of a doctor giving orders or a nurse calling for assistance. This was the voice of someone who had learned to command respect in a world that had once mocked her very presence. Sarah Martinez stood over the wounded soldier, her hands moving with the confidence of someone who had earned every ounce of authority through years of ridicule, discrimination, and proving herself again and again. The same hands that had once trembled during her first day of medical training, when her male colleagues laughed and whispered that she'd never make it, now worked to save lives with unwavering steadiness. But how does a small-town girl who was told she was too soft for emergency medicine become the person others turn to when survival is on the line? How does someone who endured years of being the punchline transform into the one writing the ending? This is the story of a woman who discovered that sometimes the greatest battles aren't fought on distant battlefields, but in hospital corridors, training rooms, and inside your own mind. It's about the moment when enduring becomes choosing, when surviving becomes thriving, and when the person everyone underestimated becomes the one everyone needs. Sarah's journey didn't begin with confidence or natural talent. It began with a single decision to refuse to quit, even when quitting would have been easier than facing another day of doubt, both from others and from herself. What she didn't know was that this decision would lead her from the quiet halls of nursing school to the front lines of emergency medicine, and eventually to a moment where everything she had learned about perseverance would be tested in ways she never imagined. The laughter stopped long ago. Now, there's only the sound of lives being saved. Sarah Martinez never planned to become a medic. Growing up in the small town of Cedar Valley, she had simpler dreams, maybe teaching elementary school or working in her father's hardware store. Life had a comfortable predictability to it. Every morning, she would help her mother prepare breakfast for her three younger brothers, walk to school along the same tree-lined streets she had known since childhood, and spend her evenings doing homework at the kitchen table while the smell of her grandmother's cooking filled the house. Her family wasn't wealthy, but they were close. Her father, Miguel, worked long hours at the hardware store he had built from nothing, serving the farming community that surrounded their town. Her mother, Elena, managed the household with the kind of quiet strength that kept everything running smoothly. Sarah was the eldest child and the only daughter, which meant she naturally fell into the role of second mother to her brothers. The first sign that Sarah's path might be different came during her junior year of high school. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon when Mrs. Patterson, her biology teacher, asked her to stay after class. Sarah assumed she was in trouble. Maybe her last test score hadn't been as good as she thought. Instead, Mrs. Patterson spread out several college brochures across her desk. "Sarah, have you thought about what you want to do after graduation?" Mrs. Patterson asked, her kind eyes studying Sarah's face carefully. The question caught Sarah off guard. Most kids in Cedar Valley didn't go to college. They graduated, found work, got married, and raised their families in the same small community where they had grown up. It wasn't a bad life, but it was predictable. "I hadn't really thought about it," Sarah admitted, fidgeting with her backpack straps. Mrs. Patterson picked up one of the brochures. It was for the state university's nursing program. "You have something special, Sarah. The way you helped Jessica when she had that panic attack last month, how you always know what to do when someone gets hurt during PE. You have natural instincts for helping people, and your grades are excellent." Sarah looked at the brochure, seeing pictures of young women in scrubs, working in clean, bright hospitals. It looked like a different world from the dusty streets and weathered buildings of Cedar Valley. "My family needs me here," she said quietly. "Sometimes the best way to help your family is to help yourself first," Mrs. Patterson replied. "Think about it. And, Sarah, don't let anyone tell you that you can't do something just because you're quiet or because you come from a small town. Some of the best medical professionals I've known started exactly where you are now." That conversation planted a seed that Sarah couldn't shake. Over the following weeks, she found herself paying attention to things she had never noticed before. When her brother Danny fell off his bike and scraped his knee, she didn't just comfort him. She carefully cleaned the wound and bandaged it properly, remembering techniques she had read about in health class. When her grandmother had one of her dizzy spells, Sarah was the one who noticed that it happened mostly in the afternoons and suggested she might need to eat more regularly throughout the day. The more she paid attention, the more she realized that helping people felt natural to her. It wasn't dramatic or heroic. It was quiet, careful attention to what people needed and finding ways to provide it. The decision to apply for nursing school wasn't easy. Sarah's parents were supportive, but worried about the cost and the distance from home. Her father worked extra hours to help save money for her education, and her mother spent evenings helping Sarah fill out financial aid applications. The whole family was making sacrifices for her dream, and the pressure of that responsibility weighed heavily on Sarah's shoulders. When the acceptance letter arrived, Sarah stared at it for a long time before opening it. Her hand shook as she read the words. "We are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted into our nursing program." The relief and excitement were overwhelming, but so was the fear. She would be leaving everything familiar behind to enter a world she only knew from textbooks and television shows. The summer before college was bittersweet. Sarah worked at her father's store, saving every penny she could for expenses the financial aid wouldn't cover. She spent her evenings with her family, trying to memorize everything about home. The way her mother hummed while cooking, how her brothers argued over video games, the sound of her father's tools in the workshop behind the house. Her friends were supportive, but also slightly confused by her choice. Most of them were planning to stay local, and Sarah sometimes wondered if she was making a mistake. The doubt was especially strong on quiet evenings when she sat on the front porch with her grandmother, watching the sunset paint the sky in familiar shades of orange and pink. "Mija," her grandmother said one evening, using the Spanish endearment that always made Sarah feel loved and protected, "you have always been the one in this family who sees what others need. When you were little, you would bring me my glasses before I even realized I was squinting. You would make your brothers sandwiches when they were hungry, but too proud to ask. This gift you have, it's not small. Don't make it small." Those words stayed with Sarah as she packed her belongings into 2 suitcases and prepared to leave for college. Her whole family drove her to the campus, their old pickup truck loaded with everything she owned. The university looked enormous compared to anything in Cedar Valley, with buildings that seemed to stretch up toward the sky and more people walking around than lived in her entire hometown. Sarah's dormitory was a tall brick building that housed over 300 students. Her roommate was a girl named Jennifer from the city who had clearly never lived anywhere without reliable internet and multiple shopping centers. Jennifer was friendly enough, but she talked about things Sarah had never experienced: concerts, restaurants, shopping malls, and sometimes Sarah felt like they were speaking different languages. The first few weeks of classes were overwhelming. Sarah had always been a good student, but college was different. The pace was faster, the expectations higher, and the competition fiercer. Her anatomy and physiology classes required memorizing more information than she had ever tackled before. Chemistry was particularly challenging. She had only had basic science courses in high school, and many of her classmates had taken advanced placement classes that had prepared them much better. But the real challenge wasn't the coursework. It was finding her place among her peers. Many of the other nursing students came from families with medical backgrounds. They talked casually about medical terminology that Sarah had to look up, and they seemed to navigate the complex world of hospitals and clinical rotations with a confidence that Sarah envied. During study groups, Sarah often felt like she was a step behind. When her classmates made references to medical shows or talked about family members who were doctors or nurses, Sarah had nothing to contribute. Her experience with medicine was limited to basic first aid and caring for her family members when they were sick. The first real test came during her clinical rotation at the university hospital. Sarah had been excited about finally getting hands-on experience, but the reality was intimidating. The hospital was busy, loud, and filled with equipment she didn't recognize. Her clinical instructor, a stern woman named Ms. Rodriguez, assigned her to shadow an experienced nurse named Patricia on the medical surgical floor. Patricia had been a nurse for over 20 years and had little patience for nervous students. She moved through her rounds efficiently, checking on patients, administering medications, and updating charts with the kind of casual competence that Sarah desperately wanted to develop. Sarah followed behind, trying to absorb everything and asking what she hoped were intelligent questions. On Sarah's second day of clinical rotation, she was asked to help with patient care for the first time. Mrs. Henderson was an elderly woman recovering from hip surgery who needed assistance getting cleaned up and changed. Sarah had helped care for her grandmother many times, so she approached the task with confidence. But Patricia watched her every move with a critical eye. "You're taking too long," she said impatiently. "In a real hospital setting, you need to be more efficient. You can't spend 15 minutes on tasks that should take 5. Sarah felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment, but she tried to work faster without sacrificing the gentle care that felt natural to her. Mrs. Henderson seemed to appreciate Sarah's careful attention, even squeezing her hand and thanking her quietly, but Patricia only shook her head. "This isn't your grandmother's house," Patricia said when they left the room. "You need to learn to balance compassion with efficiency or you'll never make it as a nurse." That criticism stung because Sarah knew Patricia was right, but she also knew that the careful, personal attention she gave to patients wasn't just about being slow. It was about seeing people as individuals rather than just medical cases. She began to wonder if there was room in modern medicine for her approach to patient care. The doubts grew stronger as the semester progressed. Sarah's grades were good, but she felt like she was constantly struggling to keep up with the expectations of clinical rotations. Some of her instructors seemed to appreciate her thorough approach to patient care, while others clearly viewed her as too slow and overly sentimental. The breaking point came during a particularly difficult shift in the emergency department. Sarah had been excited about the emergency rotation, thinking it might be where she found her niche. The fast-paced environment appealed to her, and she liked the idea of helping people during critical moments. But the emergency department was unlike anything she had experienced. The constant flow of patients, the urgent decisions, and the high-stress environment were overwhelming. Sarah found herself making small mistakes, forgetting to document procedures, taking too long to complete tasks, and generally feeling like she was in the way rather than being helpful. Dr. Williams, the attending physician overseeing the department that day, was known for being demanding but fair. He had been watching Sarah's performance throughout her rotation, and at the end of one particularly chaotic shift, he called her aside. "Martinez," he said, not unkindly, "I can see that you care about patients, and that's important. But caring isn't enough in emergency medicine. You need to be able to make quick decisions under pressure, and right now, you're hesitating when you should be acting." Sarah nodded, fighting back tears of frustration. She had worked so hard to get to this point, but it seemed like the harder she tried, the more obvious it became that she wasn't cut out for the high-intensity world of hospital medicine. That night, Sarah called home for the first time in weeks. Her mother answered, and just hearing her voice made Sarah's carefully maintained composure crumble. Through tears, she explained how difficult everything was, how behind she felt compared to her classmates, and how she was starting to think she had made a terrible mistake. "Maybe I should come home," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe nursing isn't for me." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, her mother spoke. "Mija, do you remember when your brother Carlos was born? You were only 8 years old, but when he wouldn't stop crying and I was exhausted, you were the one who figured out that he needed to be held in a specific way to feel comfortable. You didn't give up until you found what worked." Her mother paused, and Sarah could hear her father's voice in the background, asking what was wrong. "You have never been the kind of person who gives up when things get difficult," her mother continued. "But you also have never been the kind of person who forces herself into a situation that isn't right for her. So you need to decide, are you struggling because nursing is wrong for you? Or are you struggling because you haven't found the right place within nursing yet? That question kept Sarah awake for most of the night. The next morning, she made a decision that would change the direction of her life. Instead of dropping out or switching majors, she decided to explore different areas of nursing to find where she might fit best. Sarah's exploration of different nursing specialties began with a conversation with her academic advisor, Dr. Peterson. Dr. Peterson was a former emergency room nurse who had transitioned to teaching, and she had been watching Sarah's progress with interest. "I've been reviewing your clinical evaluations," Dr. Peterson said, spreading Sarah's file across her desk. "Your patient care scores are consistently high, but your efficiency ratings are lower in high-pressure environments. That doesn't mean you're not cut out for nursing. It means you need to find the right environment for your strengths." Dr. Peterson explained that nursing was much broader than most people realized. There were opportunities in community health, psychiatric care, pediatrics, geriatrics, and many other specialties that valued different skills and approaches. She suggested that Sarah spend her remaining clinical rotations exploring these different areas. The first rotation Sarah tried was pediatric nursing at the Children's Hospital. She was initially nervous about working with sick children, worried that she would find it too emotionally difficult. But from the first day, she discovered that children responded to her gentle, patient approach in ways that surprised her. 8-year-old Marcus was recovering from appendix surgery and was terrified of the medical equipment surrounding his bed. The regular nursing staff was professional and competent, but they were also busy with multiple patients and limited time for reassurance. Sarah spent extra time explaining what each machine did in terms Marcus could understand, turning the intimidating monitors into helper robots that were keeping him safe. "The beeping means your helper robot is checking to make sure your heart is strong like a superhero," Sarah explained, sitting beside Marcus's bed. "And this one is making sure you're breathing just right, like when you blow up a balloon." Marcus's fear visibly decreased as Sarah transformed the scary medical environment into something more manageable. His mother, who had been anxiously hovering by his bedside, watched Sarah's interaction with obvious relief. "You're really good with him," Marcus's mother said later, when Marcus had fallen asleep clutching a small toy Sarah had brought from the hospital's playroom. "Most of the nurses are nice, but they don't have time to really talk to him. You made him feel like a brave kid instead of a scared patient." That comment stayed with Sarah because it highlighted something she was beginning to understand about her approach to nursing. She didn't just see medical conditions. She saw people who happened to be dealing with medical conditions. This perspective took more time, but it also created connections that seemed to help with healing in ways that went beyond just medical treatment. The pediatric rotation went well, but Sarah realized that while she enjoyed working with children, it wasn't where she felt most passionate. The next rotation was in community health, working with a program that provided medical care to underserved populations in rural areas surrounding the city. This rotation opened Sarah's eyes to a completely different side of healthcare. Instead of working in a hospital setting, she traveled with a small medical team to community centers, schools, and makeshift clinics in small towns that reminded her of home. The pace was slower, the resources were limited, but the impact on people's lives was immediate and visible. In the small farming community of Millbrook, Sarah worked with nurse practitioner Janet Shun to provide basic medical care to families who couldn't afford regular health care. Janet had been working in community health for over 15 years and had developed innovative approaches to providing care with limited resources. "The key to community health," Janet explained as they set up a temporary clinic in a church basement, "is building relationships. These people don't just need medical care. They need to trust that the care they're getting is right for their situation." Sarah watched Janet work, noting how she took time to understand not just patients' medical symptoms, but also their living situations, work demands, and family responsibilities. When Janet prescribed medication for a patient's diabetes, she also discussed how the treatment plan would work with the patient's job schedule and budget constraints. Sarah found herself naturally gravitating toward this approach. During a clinic day focused on women's health, she met Rosa, the young mother of three who had been experiencing chronic fatigue and headaches. The initial examination suggested that Rosa might be dealing with depression and anxiety, but as Sarah talked with her more, a different picture emerged. Rosa worked 2 jobs to support her family, while her husband worked construction. She was responsible for all household management and childcare, and she hadn't had a full night's sleep in over 2 years. Her symptoms weren't just medical. They were the result of being overwhelmed and exhausted with no support system. Instead of immediately focusing on medication options, Sarah spent time helping Rosa identify small changes that might help manage her stress and improve her sleep. They talked about simple nutrition strategies that would work with Rosa's limited time and budget, ways to create brief moments of rest during her busy days, and community resources that might provide additional support. "No one has ever asked me about my whole life before," Rosa said at the end of their conversation. "Usually, doctors just want to know what hurts and then give me pills. You help me see that maybe I'm not broken. Maybe I'm just trying to do too much." That interaction crystallized something for Sarah. She realized that her strength as a healthcare provider wasn't in high-pressure emergency situations. It was in taking the time to understand people's complete situations and helping them find sustainable solutions. This approach might take longer, but it seemed to create lasting positive changes. The community health rotation also exposed Sarah to the military medical system for the first time. The rural communities she served included several veterans who received their health care through VA hospitals, but many of them also sought supplementary care through the community health program because they appreciated the more personal approach. One of these veterans was James Rodriguez, a former Army medic who had served multiple tours in Afghanistan before returning home to help care for his aging parents. James had been injured by an improvised explosive device during his last deployment and dealt with chronic pain and PTSD. During routine visits for pain management, James and Sarah began talking about his experiences as a medic. He described the intense, high-pressure environment where quick decisions could mean the difference between life and death, but he also talked about the satisfaction of being the person others counted on during emergencies. "Being a medic taught me that medicine isn't just about knowing what to do," James said during one visit. "It's about staying calm when everyone else is panicking and making people feel safe even when the situation is scary." Sarah found James's stories fascinating, especially his descriptions of providing care in challenging conditions with limited resources. It reminded her of the community health work she was doing, but with much higher stakes and more immediate consequences. "Have you ever thought about military medicine?" James asked during one of their conversations. "The Army is always looking for good medics, and they provide excellent training. Plus, you get to serve your country while helping people." The suggestion surprised Sarah. She had never seriously considered military service, partly because it seemed so different from her quiet, family-oriented background. But the more James talked about his experiences, the more curious she became about the possibility. James explained that military medics received intensive training that prepared them for a wide range of medical situations. Unlike civilian nursing programs that specialized early, military medical training was comprehensive and practical. Medics learned to handle everything from routine health care to trauma surgery, often in conditions that required creativity and resourcefulness. "The best medics I served with weren't necessarily the ones who were strongest or fastest," James said. "They were the ones who could stay focused under pressure and who genuinely cared about taking care of their fellow soldiers. You have both of those qualities." Sarah began researching military medical careers, discovering opportunities she hadn't known existed. The Army offered programs that would allow her to complete her nursing degree while beginning military medical training, and the training was among the most comprehensive available anywhere. But the decision to consider military service wasn't just about career opportunities. It was about challenging herself to grow in ways she hadn't imagined. Sarah realized that her struggles in high-pressure situations weren't necessarily limitations. They might be skills that needed development through the right kind of training. The idea both excited and terrified her. Military service would mean leaving her family for extended periods, adapting to a highly structured environment, and potentially being deployed to dangerous situations. But it would also mean receiving the best possible medical training and serving in a profession where her work could have life or death importance. Sarah decided to talk with military recruiters to learn more about her options. The Army recruiting office was located in a strip mall about an hour from the university, and Sarah drove there on a Saturday morning, her stomach churning with nervousness. Sergeant First Class Maria Santos was the recruiter who met with Sarah. Sergeant Santos was a former Army medic herself who had transitioned to recruiting after completing her bachelor's degree in nursing. She was professional but warm, and she took time to understand Sarah's background and interest before explaining military medical career paths. A lot of people think military medicine is all about combat situations, Sergeant Santos explained, but the reality is that military medics do everything civilian medical professionals do, plus additional specialized training. We provide routine health care, emergency treatment, preventive medicine, and specialized care for military personnel and their families. Sergeant Santos described the various military medical career fields, from basic medic training to specialized programs in emergency medicine, surgical technology, and field medicine. The training was intensive but comprehensive, and the career progression opportunities were excellent. What interests me about your background, Sergeant Santos continued, is your community health experience. The military does a lot of humanitarian work, providing medical care in disaster areas, supporting communities in developing countries, and delivering health care in remote locations. Your combination of clinical skills and cultural sensitivity would be valuable in those situations. The conversation lasted over 2 hours, and by the end, Sarah had a much clearer understanding of what military medical service might involve. Sergeant Santos gave her materials to review and suggested she visit a military medical facility to observe actual operations. The following week, Sarah arranged to spend a day at the nearby military hospital observing their emergency department and trauma center. The experience was unlike anything she had seen in civilian hospitals. The pace was fast, but there was also an underlying sense of order and teamwork that impressed her. Staff Sergeant Michael Kim was the senior medic who showed Sarah around the facility. He had been in the Army for 8 years and had served as a medic in Iraq and Afghanistan before being assigned to the hospital. Like James Rodriguez, he emphasized that successful military medics needed to be technically competent, but also emotionally resilient. The hardest part isn't learning the medical procedures, Staff Sergeant Kim explained as they watched the trauma team work on a training exercise. The hardest part is staying calm and focused when people are counting on you to save their lives. That kind of pressure either breaks people or makes them stronger. Sarah watched the medical team work through the simulated emergency, noting how each person had specific responsibilities, but also how they communicated constantly to coordinate their efforts. The efficiency was impressive, but so was the obvious care they took with their patient, even though it was just a training mannequin. Would you be interested in observing a real emergency situation? Staff Sergeant Kim asked. We have permission to let nursing students observe trauma cases as long as they don't interfere with patient care. Sarah agreed, and within an hour, she was standing in the corner of a trauma bay watching the medical team treat a soldier who had been injured in a training accident. The soldier had fallen during a rappelling exercise and had multiple injuries, including a potential spinal injury. The medical team worked with incredible efficiency and coordination. Each person knew exactly what to do and when to do it, but Sarah also noticed the constant verbal communication that kept everyone informed of the patient's status and treatment progress. The primary medic maintained a calm, reassuring voice as he explained each procedure to the patient, even while working quickly to stabilize his injuries. Within 20 minutes, the patient had been stabilized and was being prepared for surgery. The entire process was intense, but controlled, and Sarah realized she had been holding her breath for most of the procedure. "How did that feel to watch?" Staff Sergeant Kim asked as they left the trauma bay. "Overwhelming," Sarah admitted, "but also amazing. Everyone knew exactly what to do, and they made it look so smooth even though it was obviously a serious situation. That coordination comes from training and practice," Staff Sergeant Kim explained. "Military medics train constantly on emergency procedures until they become second nature. When a real emergency happens, your body knows what to do even when your mind is processing the stress." That observation made Sarah think about her struggles with efficiency during her emergency department rotation. Maybe her problem hadn't been lack of ability. Maybe it had been lack of proper training for high-pressure situations. Over the following weeks, Sarah continued researching military medical careers while completing her community health rotation. The more she learned, the more interested she became in the comprehensive training and diverse career opportunities the military offered. But the decision also meant considering fundamental changes to her life plans. Military service involved commitments that would affect her personal life, her family relationships, and her long-term career goals. Sarah needed to carefully evaluate whether military medicine aligned with her values and aspirations, or whether she was just attracted to the excitement and challenge of something completely different from her background. The decision to join the Army came gradually, then all at once. Sarah spent weeks researching military medical programs, talking with veterans, and trying to imagine herself in uniform. The turning point came during a conversation with her grandmother, who surprised Sarah with her response to the idea of military service. "Mija," her grandmother said, looking up from the quilt she was mending, "your grandfather served in the Navy during Korea? He never talked much about it, but he always said it taught him who he really was. Sometimes we need to go far from home to understand what home means." Sarah's grandfather had died when she was 12, and she had known very little about his military service. Her grandmother pulled out a small wooden box that Sarah had seen many times but never opened. Inside were her grandfather's service medals, letters he had written home, and photographs of him in his Navy uniform. "He was scared when he left," her grandmother continued, touching one of the photographs gently. "But he came back stronger. Not harder, stronger. There's a difference." That conversation helped Sarah understand that her interest in military service wasn't about running away from her background or trying to become someone different. It was about finding a way to develop her potential while serving something bigger than herself. Sarah made the decision to enlist in the Army with a commitment to military medical training. The process involved multiple interviews, medical examinations, aptitude tests, and background checks. Each step felt like a point of no return, moving her closer to a future that was both exciting and terrifying. When Sarah told her nursing school instructors about her decision, their reactions were mixed. Some were concerned that she was giving up on civilian nursing too quickly, while others were excited about the training opportunities military service would provide. Dr. Peterson, her advisor, was supportive but wanted to make sure Sarah understood what she was committing to. "Military medicine is excellent training," Dr. Peterson said, "but it's also a significant commitment. You'll be serving your country in situations that could be dangerous, and you'll be away from your family for extended periods. Are you prepared for that?" Sarah had been asking herself the same question. The answer was that she wasn't entirely prepared, but she was willing to learn and adapt. The military would provide the training and support she needed to develop into the medical professional she wanted to become. Basic training was scheduled to begin 6 weeks after Sarah finished her second year of nursing school. The time between making the commitment and actually leaving for training passed quickly, filled with family visits, paperwork, and mental preparation for the biggest change in her life. Sarah's family was proud, but worried. Her parents had supported her decision to pursue nursing, but military service felt much more serious and potentially dangerous. Her brothers were impressed that their quiet older sister was going to be a soldier, but they also seemed to understand that she would be different when she came back. The night before Sarah left for basic training, her family gathered for a farewell dinner. Her mother had prepared all of Sarah's favorite foods, and her grandmother had made a special dessert. The mood was celebratory, but also melancholy, as everyone understood that this goodbye was different from when Sarah had left for college. "We're proud of you," her father said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've always been brave, but now you're choosing to be brave for other people too." Basic training at Fort Moore was everything Sarah had expected and nothing like she had imagined. The physical demands were challenging, but manageable. Sarah had always been in decent shape, and the gradual increase in physical training allowed her to adapt. The mental and emotional challenges were more difficult. The military environment was unlike anything in Sarah's previous experience. Everything was structured, timed, and evaluated. There was no room for the kind of thoughtful, patient approach that had characterized her civilian nursing training. Decisions had to be made quickly, instructions had to be followed precisely, and personal preferences were irrelevant. Drill Sergeant Martinez was demanding but fair, pushing the recruits to perform beyond what they thought they could achieve. During the first week, Sarah struggled with the pace and intensity of training. She was used to taking time to think through problems, but military training required immediate responses and decisive action. The breakthrough came during the third week of basic training, during a field exercise that required the recruits to navigate through various obstacles while carrying heavy equipment. Sarah was struggling with one of the obstacles, a rope climb that required upper body strength she hadn't fully developed. After watching Sarah attempt the climb multiple times, Drill Sergeant Martinez pulled her aside. "Martinez," he said, "you're thinking too much. You're analyzing the rope, the technique, and your form when you should just be climbing. Sometimes the only way to succeed is to stop overthinking and start doing." That advice applied to much more than rope climbing. Sarah realized that her tendency to analyze situations thoroughly was valuable in many contexts, but it could also be a limitation when quick action was required. Military training was teaching her to balance careful thinking with decisive action. The medical training component of Sarah's military education began after she completed basic training. The Army's medical education program was intensive and comprehensive, covering everything from basic first aid to advanced trauma care. Sarah found herself learning procedures and techniques that went far beyond her civilian nursing education. The training was conducted at the Army Medical Education and Training Campus at Fort Eisenhower, where Sarah joined other medical trainees from various military branches. The diversity of backgrounds and experiences among her fellow trainees was remarkable. Some were recent high school graduates, others had civilian medical experience, and a few were career military personnel transitioning to medical roles. Sarah's roommate at Fort Eisenhower was Jessica Chun, a former emergency medical technician from Los Angeles who had joined the Army to get advanced medical training. Jessica was outgoing, confident, and seemed to adapt to military life effortlessly. She also had a sense of humor that helped Sarah navigate the more challenging aspects of training. "The key to succeeding here," Jessica explained during their second week of training, "is understanding that they're not just teaching us medical procedures. They're teaching us to be medical professionals who can work anywhere, under any conditions. That requires a different kind of mindset." The medical training curriculum was designed to prepare military medics for a wide range of scenarios. Students learned to provide care in field conditions with limited resources, to work as part of coordinated medical teams, and to maintain medical standards under stress. The training was hands-on, practical, and often conducted under simulated emergency conditions. One of Sarah's instructors was Sergeant First Class David Johnson, a combat medic with multiple deployments who had transitioned to teaching. Sergeant Johnson had a reputation for being demanding but excellent, and his classes were among the most respected in the program. Military medicine is different from civilian medicine, Sergeant Johnson explained during his first lecture to Sarah's class. In civilian settings, you usually have access to specialized equipment, extensive support staff, and predictable working conditions. In military medicine, you need to be able to provide excellent care regardless of your circumstances. To illustrate this point, Sergeant Johnson designed training exercises that required students to provide medical care under various challenging conditions. Students practiced trauma care in simulated combat environments, learned to improvise medical equipment when standard supplies weren't available, and developed skills for coordinating medical evacuations. Sarah initially struggled with some of these exercises. Her careful, methodical approach to patient care, which had been an asset in civilian settings, sometimes slowed her down during high-pressure simulations. But she gradually learned to adapt her natural strengths to military requirements. The turning point came during a particularly challenging exercise that simulated providing medical care during a mass casualty event. Students were required to triage multiple casualties, coordinate with other medical personnel, and maintain accurate documentation while working under time pressure and simulated combat conditions. Sarah was assigned to lead one of the triage teams, a responsibility that initially intimidated her. But as the exercise progressed, she discovered that her ability to assess people's conditions quickly and accurately was actually enhanced under pressure. The military training had taught her to trust her instincts and make decisions confidently, while her nursing background provided the medical knowledge she needed. "Outstanding work, Martinez," Sergeant Johnson said after the exercise. "You demonstrated exactly the kind of leadership and medical competence we're trying to develop. You stayed calm under pressure, made good decisions quickly, and kept your team functioning effectively." That feedback was a revelation for Sarah. She realized that the skills she had always possessed, the ability to care for people and make good judgments about their needs, had been enhanced rather than replaced by her military training. She was becoming a more confident and capable medical professional while maintaining the compassionate approach that had originally drawn her to healthcare. The advanced phases of Sarah's medical training focused on specialized skills that would prepare her for deployment. She learned combat casualty care, emergency surgery techniques, and field medicine procedures. The training was intensive and sometimes emotionally difficult, as it involved preparing for situations where her skills might mean the difference between life and death. One particularly challenging aspect of the training was learning to work with battlefield injuries. Using realistic medical simulators and training scenarios, students practiced treating gunshot wounds, explosion injuries, and other trauma that they might encounter in combat situations. The training was deliberately intense to prepare medics for the psychological as well as medical challenges of treating severely injured patients. Sarah found this training difficult but important. The simulations forced her to confront the reality that military medical service might require her to work with injuries more severe than anything she had encountered in civilian settings. But the training also reinforced her confidence in her ability to provide effective care even under the most challenging circumstances. During one particularly realistic training scenario, Sarah was required to treat multiple simulated casualties while under time pressure and with limited supplies. One of the casualties was programmed to have life-threatening injuries that required immediate surgical intervention to survive. Working with her training partner, Sarah successfully stabilized the patient and prepared him for medical evacuation. The entire procedure took less than 10 minutes, but it demonstrated that she had developed the skills and confidence necessary to handle emergency medical situations effectively. "You've come a long way from the student who was worried about working too slowly," observed Captain Lisa Rodriguez, one of the senior medical instructors. "Your approach to patient care is still thorough and compassionate, but now it's also efficient and confident. That's exactly what we want to see in our medics." The final phase of Sarah's medical training involved rotations through different military medical facilities to gain experience with various aspects of military health care. She spent time in military hospitals, field medical units, and training facilities, learning how military medical systems operated and where her skills might be most valuable. During a rotation at a military hospital's emergency department, Sarah worked alongside experienced military medical personnel treating both routine medical cases and emergency situations. The experience reinforced her growing confidence in her abilities, while also showing her how much she still had to learn. Staff Sergeant Kim Rodriguez, the senior medic supervising Sarah's rotation, was impressed with her development. When you started this rotation, I could tell you had good instincts and training, but you seemed uncertain about applying your skills in military settings, she told Sarah at the end of the rotation. Now you're functioning like an experienced medic. You've learned to trust your training and your judgment. As Sarah's formal medical training neared completion, she began to receive information about her first assignment. Military medical personnel were assigned based on their skills, the needs of various units, and their career development goals. Sarah hoped to be assigned to a position that would allow her to continue developing her skills while serving in a meaningful way. The assignment notification came during the final week of her medical training program. Sarah had been assigned to a forward operating medical unit that provided emergency medical care and field medicine support. The position would involve both routine medical care and emergency response, exactly the kind of comprehensive medical practice that appealed to her. More significantly, her unit was scheduled for deployment to Afghanistan within 6 months of her arrival. This would be Sarah's first overseas deployment and her first experience providing medical care in an active combat zone. The assignment was exactly what her training had prepared her for, but it was also the ultimate test of everything she had learned. Sarah's first assignment was to the 452nd Medical Company at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. The unit specialized in forward medical support, which meant they provided emergency medical care and evacuation services for combat units operating in remote or dangerous areas. It was exactly the kind of challenging assignment that Sarah had trained for, but it was also intimidating. Reporting to Fort Campbell felt like entering another new world, even though Sarah had been in the Army for over a year. Training environments were designed to be controlled and educational, but operational units were focused on real-world missions with genuine consequences. The difference in atmosphere was immediately apparent. Captain Jennifer Wong was the officer in charge of Sarah's medical section. Captain Wong was a career Army officer with multiple deployments and extensive experience in military medicine. She had a reputation for being demanding but fair and for developing excellent medics who went on to leadership positions throughout the Army. Martinez, Captain Wong said during Sarah's initial briefing, "Your training records are excellent, and your instructors speak highly of your clinical skills and leadership potential. But training is different from operations, and operations in a deployed environment are different from anything you've experienced so far." Captain Wong explained that the unit was scheduled to deploy to Afghanistan in 4 months, where they would be responsible for providing medical support to several remote outposts and conducting medical evacuations throughout a large area of operations. The work would be challenging, dangerous, and critically important. Our medics save lives, Captain Wong continued, but they also have to be prepared to function in a combat environment. You'll need to be qualified on weapons, understand tactical procedures, and be ready to defend your patients and fellow soldiers if necessary. Can you handle that level of responsibility? Sarah assured Captain Wong that she was prepared for the challenges ahead, but privately she wondered if that was true. Her training had prepared her technically, but the reality of deploying to a war zone was still abstract and somewhat frightening. Sarah's new teammates in the medical section were experienced soldiers who had worked together through multiple deployments. Staff Sergeant Mike Thompson was the senior medic, a quiet, competent professional who had been in the Army for over 10 years. Specialist Amanda Foster was a combat medic with 2 previous deployments who was known for her technical skills and unflappable demeanor under pressure. Integrating into an established team was challenging for Sarah. Her new teammates were friendly, but reserved, waiting to see how she would perform before fully accepting her as part of the group. This was standard practice in military units. Trust had to be earned through demonstrated competence and reliability. The pre-deployment training period was intensive and comprehensive. Sarah learned tactical medicine procedures, practiced combat skills, and participated in extensive field exercises designed to simulate the conditions they would encounter in Afghanistan. The training was realistic and demanding, often conducted under stressful conditions that tested both technical skills and emotional resilience. One particularly challenging exercise involved a simulated mass casualty event in a hostile environment. Sarah's team was required to treat multiple wounded soldiers while under simulated enemy fire, coordinate medical evacuations under time pressure, and maintain communications with higher headquarters. During the exercise, Sarah was assigned to treat a soldier with simulated injuries that required immediate surgical intervention. Working under time pressure and simulated combat stress, Sarah successfully stabilized the patient and prepared him for medical evacuation. Her performance was technically proficient, but more importantly, she remained calm and focused throughout the high-pressure situation. "Good work, Martinez," Staff Sergeant Thompson told her after the exercise. "You stayed cool under pressure and made good decisions. That's what we need from our medics downrange." That feedback was important because it represented acceptance from her team leader. Staff Sergeant Thompson was known for his high standards and careful evaluation of new medics. His approval meant that Sarah was demonstrating the competence and reliability necessary to function effectively in their unit. As the deployment date approached, Sarah received 2 weeks of leave to visit her family before departing for Afghanistan. The visit home was bittersweet. Sarah was excited about her upcoming assignment, but also nervous about being deployed to a combat zone for the first time. Her family was proud of her military service, but worried about her safety. Her parents had been following news about Afghanistan, and they understood that their daughter would be working in a dangerous environment. The family spent time together, but there was an underlying tension about the upcoming deployment. "Are you scared?" her youngest brother asked during one of their conversations. "A little," Sarah admitted, "but I'm also excited. This is what I've been training for, and I know I'm ready to do important work." Her grandmother, now in her 80s, had a different perspective. "Fear is normal before something important," she told Sarah. "Your grandfather was scared before he shipped out too. But he said that serving something bigger than yourself makes you stronger than your fear." The deployment to Afghanistan began with a long series of flights through military transportation hubs. Sarah and her unit flew from Kentucky to Germany, then to a staging area in the Middle East, and finally to Bagram Airfield in Afghanistan. Each leg of the journey made their destination feel more real and more significant. Afghanistan was unlike anywhere Sarah had ever been. The landscape was harsh and beautiful, the climate was extreme, and there was a constant underlying awareness of security threats. The military base where they were stationed was well protected, but also clearly a forward operating location in an active combat zone. Sarah's unit was assigned to provide medical support to several remote outposts scattered throughout their area of operations. This meant they would split their time between maintaining a medical facility at their main base and conducting medical missions to the outposts, often by helicopter or convoy. The work began immediately upon arrival. Afghanistan had been an active combat zone for over a decade, and medical personnel were constantly busy treating both combat injuries and routine medical issues. Sarah's training had prepared her for the technical aspects of the work, but the operational tempo and high stakes were intense. Her first major test came during her second week in country. Sarah was part of a medical team conducting a routine visit to a remote outpost when they received a call for emergency medical evacuation. A convoy had been attacked by an improvised explosive device, and there were multiple casualties requiring immediate medical attention. The helicopter ride to the casualty site was Sarah's first experience flying into a potentially dangerous situation. The crew chief briefed the medical team on security procedures and potential threats, while Sarah mentally reviewed trauma treatment protocols and prepared her medical equipment. The scene at the casualty site was chaotic but controlled. Several soldiers had been injured in the explosion, with injuries ranging from minor cuts and bruises to serious trauma requiring immediate medical intervention. Sarah was assigned to work with the most seriously injured casualty, a young soldier with multiple shrapnel wounds and possible internal injuries. Working quickly but carefully, Sarah assessed the soldier's condition and began emergency treatment. The soldier was conscious but in pain and obviously frightened. As Sarah worked to stabilize his injuries, she maintained calm, reassuring communication with him. "I'm Sarah, and I'm here to take care of you," she told him. "You're hurt, but you're going to be okay. I need you to stay still while I check your injuries." While providing medical treatment, Sarah also coordinated with the helicopter crew and other medical personnel to prepare for medical evacuation. The soldier's injuries were serious enough to require surgery, but not immediately life-threatening if he received proper care promptly. The medical evacuation went smoothly, and the soldier was successfully transported to a military hospital where he received surgical treatment. Sarah's quick assessment and effective emergency care had stabilized his condition and probably prevented more serious complications. "Outstanding work, Martinez," Captain Wong told her after the mission. "You performed exactly like we need our medics to perform: calm, competent, and focused on taking care of soldiers. That soldier is going to recover completely because you did your job correctly." That first successful emergency medical mission established Sarah's credibility with her unit and confirmed her confidence in her training and abilities. But it also made the reality of her deployment more concrete. She was providing medical care for soldiers who were risking their lives, and her skills could literally mean the difference between life and death. Over the following months, Sarah participated in dozens of medical missions throughout their area of operations. Some were routine medical visits to outposts, others were emergency evacuations, and a few were complex operations that required coordination with combat units and specialized medical teams. Each mission taught Sarah something new about military medicine and about herself. She learned to work effectively under various types of stress, to make quick decisions with limited information, and to maintain her medical standards regardless of challenging conditions. One particularly memorable mission involved providing medical support during a multi-day operation to clear insurgents from a remote valley. Sarah's medical team accompanied the combat units and established a temporary medical facility that could handle both routine injuries and emergency trauma care. During the second day of the operation, the combat units came under heavy attack, resulting in several casualties. Sarah and her team found themselves treating wounded soldiers while artillery fire could be heard in the distance, and radio communications described ongoing combat operations. Working in a tent with basic medical equipment, Sarah treated a soldier with a gunshot wound to the leg. The injury was serious, but not life-threatening if treated properly. While cleaning and bandaging the wound, Sarah realized that she felt completely calm and focused despite the chaotic environment around her. "This is weird," the wounded soldier said, wincing as Sarah adjusted his bandage. "I was terrified during the firefight, but now I feel safe even though we're still in a dangerous place." Sarah understood what he meant. Despite the ongoing security threats and challenging conditions, the medical treatment area felt like a place of safety and healing. She realized that her ability to provide competent, caring medical treatment created an environment of calm and security that benefited everyone around her. "That's your job," Staff Sergeant Thompson observed later, after the wounded soldiers had been evacuated to higher-level medical care. "When soldiers get hurt, they need to know that someone competent is taking care of them. You give them that confidence." As Sarah's deployment progressed, she took on increasing levels of responsibility within her medical team. Captain Wong began assigning her to lead medical missions and to train newer medics who joined the unit. Sarah discovered that she enjoyed teaching and mentoring, and that her own skills improved as she helped others develop their capabilities. The most challenging mission of Sarah's deployment came near the end of her tour. Her medical team was called to respond to a complex emergency involving a helicopter that had been forced to make an emergency landing in a remote area. The helicopter crew was injured, and the location was difficult to reach and potentially dangerous. Sarah was designated as the lead medic for the rescue mission, responsible for coordinating medical care for the injured crew members and managing medical evacuation procedures. The mission required flying into an uncertain security situation and providing medical care under challenging conditions. The rescue operation was successful, but it required Sarah to make several critical decisions about medical priorities and evacuation procedures under significant time pressure. Her leadership and medical competence were essential to the mission's success, and the helicopter crew members all survived their injuries. Martinez, Captain Wong, said after the mission, "You've developed into exactly the kind of medic we need leading our teams. You've proven that you can handle any situation we're likely to encounter, and you've shown leadership qualities that make everyone around you perform better." That feedback represented the culmination of Sarah's transformation from an uncertain nursing student to a confident, competent military medical professional. She had proven to herself and others that she could handle the highest levels of responsibility and pressure while maintaining the compassionate, caring approach that had originally drawn her to healthcare. As her deployment neared its end, Sarah reflected on how much she had changed and grown over the past year. The quiet, uncertain young woman who had struggled with efficiency during her emergency department rotation had developed into a confident leader who could make life-or-death decisions under pressure while maintaining her fundamental commitment to caring for others. But Sarah also knew that her military service was preparing her for something bigger than just personal development. The skills and confidence she had gained would serve her throughout her career, whether she remained in the military or eventually returned to civilian healthcare. She had learned that her natural strengths could be enhanced rather than diminished by training and experience, and that the most effective medical professionals combine technical competence with genuine care for their patients. The transformation was complete, but the journey was just beginning. Returning from deployment was more complicated than Sarah had anticipated. After a year of high-stakes medical missions and life-or-death decisions, the routine of garrison life at Fort Campbell felt strange and somewhat anticlimactic. Sarah had grown accustomed to the intensity and purpose of deployment, and readjusting to a peacetime military environment required its own kind of adaptation. The first few weeks back were filled with post-deployment procedures, medical evaluations, and mandatory briefings designed to help soldiers readjust to life in the United States. Sarah participated in all the required activities, but she also found herself restless and eager to return to meaningful medical work. Captain Wong, who had also returned from the deployment, noticed Sarah's restlessness during their post-deployment counseling session. "It's normal to feel unsettled after coming back from deployment," Captain Wong explained. "You've been doing important high-intensity work for a year, and now you're adjusting to a different pace and different priorities. The key is finding ways to stay challenged and engage while you're not deployed." Captain Wong had a proposal for Sarah. The Army was expanding its training programs for military medics, and they needed experienced combat medics to serve as instructors. Sarah's combination of clinical competence, leadership ability, and recent operational experience made her an ideal candidate for a teaching position. Teaching would allow you to share your experience with new medics while continuing to develop your own skills, Captain Wong explained. It's also excellent preparation for advanced leadership positions. What do you think? The opportunity appealed to Sarah for several reasons. Teaching would allow her to use her deployment experience to help prepare other medics for the challenges they would face. It would also provide opportunities for professional development and advanced training that could benefit her long-term career. Sarah accepted the teaching assignment and was transferred to the Army Medical Education and Training Campus at Fort Eisenhower, the same facility where she had completed her own medical training. Returning to Fort Eisenhower as an instructor rather than a student was a powerful reminder of how much she had changed and developed. Sarah's first teaching assignment was with a class of new Army medics who were just beginning their advanced medical training. The students were diverse. Some were recent high school graduates, others were older soldiers changing career fields, and a few were prior service personnel from other branches of the military. The first day of class was both exciting and intimidating for Sarah. She had led medical teams during deployment, but teaching a formal class was a different kind of leadership challenge. Sarah had prepared extensively, reviewing lesson plans and practicing her presentation, but she was still nervous about her ability to effectively communicate complex medical concepts. "Good morning," Sarah began, addressing her first class of 24 students. "I'm Sergeant Martinez, and I'll be your primary instructor for trauma medicine and field medical procedures. Before we begin, I want you to know that everything we're going to cover in this course is based on real-world experience and proven techniques that will help you save lives." Sarah had decided to base her teaching approach on the same principles that had guided her patient care, combining technical competence with genuine concern for the people she was helping. In this case, she wanted to help her students develop both the medical skills and the confidence they would need to succeed as military medics. The trauma medicine curriculum was intensive and challenging, covering everything from basic emergency care to advanced surgical techniques. Sarah taught both classroom sessions and hands-on practical exercises using realistic medical simulators and scenarios based on actual cases she had encountered during deployment. One of Sarah's innovations as an instructor was incorporating decision-making exercises into the medical training. Rather than just teaching students how to perform medical procedures, she created scenarios that required them to assess situations, prioritize treatments, and make judgments about patient care under time pressure. "Medical knowledge is important," Sarah explained to her students, "but the ability to make good decisions quickly is what separates competent medics from exceptional ones. You need to be able to assess a situation, understand your options, and choose the best course of action even when you don't have complete information." During one practical exercise, Sarah presented her students with a simulated mass casualty scenario involving multiple patients with different types of injuries. Students had to perform triage, coordinate with other medical personnel, and manage resources while working under time pressure. Specialist Jennifer Park was one of Sarah's students who initially struggled with the decision-making aspects of the training. Jennifer had excellent technical skills and comprehensive medical knowledge, but she tended to hesitate when faced with complex scenarios that required quick judgments. "I understand the medical procedures," Jennifer told Sarah after a particularly challenging exercise, "but I keep second-guessing myself when I have to make decisions quickly. What if I choose the wrong priority or miss something important?" Sarah recognized Jennifer's struggle because it reminded her of her own early challenges with confidence and decision-making. "The key," Sarah told Jennifer, "is trusting your training and your instincts. You know more than you think you do, and hesitation can be more dangerous than making a less-than-perfect decision quickly." To help Jennifer build confidence, Sarah designed additional practice scenarios that gradually increased in complexity. She also spent extra time coaching Jennifer on decision-making frameworks and techniques for managing uncertainty under pressure. Over the course of several weeks, Jennifer's performance improved dramatically. She learned to trust her medical knowledge and make decisions confidently, even in complex situations. By the end of the course, Jennifer was performing at the same level as her most confident classmates. "Thank you for not giving up on me," Jennifer told Sarah at the end of the training program. "You helped me understand that being a good medic isn't about never making mistakes. It's about making the best decisions you can with the information you have." That interaction reinforced Sarah's understanding of why teaching was so rewarding. Helping other medics develop their skills and confidence was directly contributing to their ability to save lives and serve their fellow soldiers effectively. Sarah's success as an instructor led to additional teaching responsibilities and opportunities for professional development. She was selected to attend advanced courses in military medical education and leadership, and she began developing new training programs based on lessons learned from recent military operations. One of Sarah's most significant contributions as an instructor was developing a new curriculum for teaching medical decision-making under stress. The program combined medical training with psychological techniques for managing stress and maintaining performance under pressure. Combat medics need to be able to function effectively regardless of their emotional state or the conditions around them, Sarah explained in a presentation to senior medical education leaders. This curriculum teaches students how to maintain clinical judgment and technical competence even when they're scared, tired, or working in dangerous conditions. The curriculum was well received and was eventually adopted throughout the Army's medical training system. Sarah's innovative approach to medical education was recognized with several awards and commendations, and she was promoted to staff sergeant ahead of her peers. But even as Sarah achieved success as a military instructor, she began thinking about her long-term career goals. Military service had provided excellent training and meaningful work, but Sarah also felt drawn to opportunities in civilian healthcare, where she could apply her military medical experience in different ways. The decision to transition from military to civilian healthcare wasn't easy. Sarah had found purpose and success in the Army, and she valued the sense of mission and camaraderie that characterized military service. But she also wanted to explore how her skills and experience could contribute to healthcare in civilian communities. Sarah began researching civilian career opportunities that would allow her to use her military medical training while serving in different capacities. She was particularly interested in emergency medicine, trauma care, and community health programs that served underserved populations. The transition process involved completing additional civilian nursing certifications, applying for nursing licenses, and interviewing with potential employers. Sarah's military experience was valuable, but civilian healthcare had different requirements and expectations that she needed to understand. One opportunity that particularly appealed to Sarah was a position with a civilian emergency medical service that provided care in rural and underserved areas. The organization served communities throughout several states, providing emergency medical care, disaster response, and community health services. Dr. Michael Stevens was the medical director who interviewed Sarah for the position. Dr. Stevens was a former military physician who understood the value of military medical training and experience. "Your military background is exactly what we're looking for," Dr. Stevens told Sarah during her interview. "You have experience providing high-quality medical care under challenging conditions, and you've demonstrated leadership and adaptability. Those skills are essential for the work we do." The position would involve working as a flight medic on helicopter emergency medical services, responding to serious accidents and medical emergencies throughout a large geographic area. The work would be challenging and high stakes, similar in many ways to her military medical missions. Sarah accepted the position and began the transition from military to civilian service. Leaving the Army after several years of meaningful service was emotional, but Sarah was excited about the opportunity to continue using her medical skills in a different context. The Civilian Emergency Medical Service provided additional training specific to their operations and procedures, but Sarah's military background had prepared her well for the demands of the job. Within a few months, she was functioning effectively as a senior flight medic and beginning to take on leadership responsibilities within the organization. The work was deeply satisfying because it allowed Sarah to combine her technical medical skills with her commitment to serving people in crisis. Each emergency call was an opportunity to make a difference in someone's life, often during the most frightening and vulnerable moments they would ever experience. One particularly memorable call involved responding to a serious car accident in a rural area where a family with young children had been injured. Sarah's team provided emergency medical care at the scene and transported the most seriously injured family members to trauma centers for surgery. The accident had been serious, but Sarah's quick assessment and effective treatment had stabilized the injured patients and prevented more serious complications. Several weeks later, Sarah received a letter from the family thanking her for her care and letting her know that everyone had recovered completely. "You saved our lives," the letter said, "but you also made us feel safe during the scariest moment of our lives. We will never forget your kindness and professionalism." That letter reminded Sarah of why she had originally been drawn to healthcare and why her long journey from uncertain nursing student to confident medical professional had been worthwhile. She had learned that her natural instincts to care for people could be enhanced and strengthened through training and experience rather than replaced by technical competence. Sarah's career continued to develop as she gained experience in civilian emergency medicine. She pursued additional certifications, took on training responsibilities, and eventually moved into leadership positions within her organization. But regardless of her title or responsibilities, she remained focused on the fundamental mission that had guided her throughout her career, providing excellent medical care while treating every patient with dignity and compassion. The transformation from the uncertain young woman who had struggled with confidence during her nursing school clinical rotations to the respected medical professional who now trained others and led emergency response teams was complete. But Sarah understood that the transformation had not changed who she was fundamentally. It had revealed and developed capabilities that had been there all along. Years later, when Sarah was asked to speak to new nursing students about career development, she shared the lessons she had learned during her own journey. "The most important thing I learned," she told the students, "is that caring about people is not a weakness that needs to be overcome. It's a strength that needs to be developed. Technical skills are essential, but the ability to see patients as people and to provide care that addresses their complete needs is what makes the difference between competent medical care and truly healing care." Sarah's story had come full circle. The quiet, uncertain student who had once worried about being too slow and too caring had become a confident leader who understood that her greatest strengths as a medical professional came from the same qualities that had once seemed like limitations. The laughter had indeed stopped long ago, replaced by the sound of lives being saved and the quiet satisfaction of work that truly mattered. In the end, Sarah's journey proved that the most significant transformations are not about becoming someone different, but about becoming the best version of who you were meant to be. The woman who had endured doubt and criticism had not just survived, she had thrived, and in doing so, she had created a career that allowed her to help others do the same.